Thank you very much. Special thanks, obviously, to Dr. Cutshall for inviting me to share with you today. Really, this is just birthed out of something that we did in our local church and then did it in Florida. I'm from Gainesville, Florida, and we did something there, and we did it on a statewide level. And Dr. Cutshall very graciously invited me to come and share it with you. Just to share a little bit about my background is that as a young man at 18, I joined the military. I was a military police officer for the time I served in the military. When I got out, I was a civilian city police officer and eventually a state trooper in South Carolina there for a while. And then after about 7 years as a state trooper, God called me into full-time ministry. I quit, went back to Lee, got full-time ministry. I'm a pastor now in Gainesville. I've been there about 20 years. And this is a thing that I think that sometimes when we talk about it, people lean one way or the other. It's either or. Does God protect us? Does God watch over us? Or do we need to do something as it relates to security in our churches? And I think it's a both and rather than an either or. I think it's something that you really need to consider in your church. And part of what I'm going to do today is kind of sell you on the idea that you need a church security ministry, safety security ministry at your church, and maybe help you to implement that in very simple ways. When I go to something like this, I want something I can carry away. I want something to say, can I do this now? What can I put together in a very short period of time? And maybe just help you to launch it and also provide you with some materials that'll long-term help you to establish this ministry in your church. So today, there's an outline in your packet there, and I'm just going to kind of jump into it. And I think everybody here, if you're a leader or a ministry leader in any way, pastor, ministry leader in some way in your church, I think you really need to consider to establishing a church security system. And why you should do this, and I think if you need a scriptural reference, it's out of Nehemiah chapter 4, where he said, we prayed to our God and posted a guard. And I think that's that both and approach. Jesus even said that if you have a cloak, and when he was sending out his disciples, he said, sell it and buy a sword. And there's some controversy over those passages of scripture, but I think that the implication of that is that as ministry leaders, we have a responsibility for those who worship in our congregations and where we have ministry, and that God can use us not only just to lead people in a spiritual development, but also to provide security or protection or safety for those people. Let me share a couple of things, just recent things that have come up. You're familiar with this picture. This is at Jacksonville Landing just a week or so ago. There's a gaming conference there. Young man doesn't win. He pulls out an automatic pistol and he shoots 12 people. 3 of those people, including himself, 2 victims and himself, die at the end of that. There was no security there. They didn't have any kind of metal detectors. They didn't provide any security. And if you ever go online and just listen to the audio tape from that, there's this panic and pandemonium there because nobody really knows what to do while this guy walks around. And you can even hear a pause in the shooting where he reloads and continues to shoot at people there. I'll give you another one. This one's probably a little bit more high profile. Parkland, Florida, South Florida. A school there, a high school, in a very nice neighborhood. They had a resource deputy there, and still, 20, I think over 30 people were shot, 17 were wounded, 13 or so passed away. And, it's just a tragedy there that even though they had a resource officer there, I think the real problem with what happened, that if you dig into that scenario, is people there really didn't know what to do when a crisis situation came their way. And now let's talk about some church situations here. Emmanuel Baptist Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Inner city, well-respected, well-established Baptist church. Dylan Roof comes in on a Wednesday night for Bible study, sits through the entire Bible study with them, and then when it goes time for prayer at the end of that Bible study, he pulls out a .45 caliber Glock pistol and begins to fire on the people in attendance. 9 people die, 1 person survived the attack, and they said that while he was there, he just kind of relished in the fact of the carnage that he was causing there. After that situation, not too much longer after that, most of those are photographs of the people who passed away, including the pastor, who's in the lower row of pictures in the center there, all passed away from that violent attack. This is one I think that really kind of got most people's attention. Sutherland Springs, Texas. Rural community, many of our churches are like that, not a very big church, 50 people in an average Sunday morning attendance. They are there on a Sunday morning, they have attendance. Devin Kelly comes in with an assault rifle and he begins to fire on the congregation. He shoots 46 people of the 50 people that were there. 26 of them pass away. If you look at this picture here, they for those of you who Facebook Live or live stream your services, they live stream their services. This is the Sunday before the attack. And this is, I believe, is fellowship time. I just took a screenshot of it. They're walking around, shaking hands, hugging each other, just your typical church service. And many of the people that are in this shot right now have all passed away since then. Have all been shot. They all died. And it's just a terrible tragedy. The pastor survived that just because he was out of town. But the person who was in charge of the service that particular day is also gone. The pastor's daughter happened to be in church that day. She died as well. Massive carnage there that took place at that church. Let me tell you another reason why I think you ought to consider this. Oftentimes, leaders or pastors, leadership people are typically the target of these situations. Very seldom do there's a shooting or there's some kind of attack in a church where the leadership's not involved. And, from time to time, pastors say, I'm not really worried about my safety, I'm worried about my church. Well, what would happen if you were suddenly gone and next Sunday, your church had to try and pull itself together and have worship there? It is cataclysmic for something to happen, even if you weren't lost completely, for what would happen to your church and the ministry. They're the devastation. Sutherland Springs, they don't even have church there anymore. These kind of things have a devastating impact on the congregation and even on the community. It has changed the community. I'm sure they're trying to pull together and stuff, but it is a huge impact. There's another church that was here in Tennessee. I believe it's in Nashville. That church there, the guy, when he approached the church, he said he wanted to make that church the church version of Columbine. He had 3 weapons with him. He came to the church. He had already shot a couple people at a gas station. When he approached the church, he shot somebody in the parking lot. And what happened was there happened to be a former police officer there, and it was a lady, and she was armed, and she confronted and stopped the guy from doing that. There are people with evil intent who would love nothing more than to come in and create havoc, carnage, and destruction at a church. So oftentimes when I talk to people about this, they say, well, I have people in my church and they carry a concealed weapon. Or I have people in my church who, I had one guy tell me, he said, hey, if somebody came in like that, there's so many people that carry a weapon in my church that I wouldn't know what would happen. They would just be, he said, I would just hit the ground to keep myself from being shot when they went through. Here's the deal. It's not just about making sure that there are people inside your congregation who are armed. It's about making sure that there are people inside your congregation who are prepared in case something difficult happens. So here's what I would say. Here's another reason why I think that you should consider having a safety or security ministry at your church. If you're a leader in your church, if you're a pastor, if you're a ministry leader, we have an obligation to protect the most vulnerable people who attend our church services. We have an obligation to look out for those people who come into our place and our place of worship. And I think that responsibility cannot be denied at this point. So there are people in your congregation that are vulnerable, that are looking to you to help protect them during a situation like this. The other reason I would say is property crimes. It's an escalating amount of property crimes against churches right now. They don't view your church any more sacred than they do any other place or any other place they want to be, they would victimize. So property crimes is at an alarming rate amongst houses of worship. I put these 2 photographs in here because this is oftentimes the way people view your property, your church, your congregation. They just look at it like it's another place. They don't really care. They have no reverence for the things that you have reverence for. And that's another reason why you probably ought to have a safety and security team. Here's the way most people view churches. Churches are soft targets. They look at your house of worship and they think you're soft. They think that you are people who, you do a lot of things good or a lot of things right, but they view you as a soft target. And here's a couple of reasons why. Churches stand for religious truth that they find narrow-minded or offensive. There are many people out there right now who view you as a religious extremist. You're a zealot. Oftentimes you're put into a political category. You represent the political power that I don't like. And because of that, they see it as a license to victimize your church, your property, and the things that you hold sacred. So they view oftentimes that you're considered a soft target because you are a narrow-minded, zealot religious person in a culture right now that doesn't embrace that.
We will resume this teaching after a short message from International School of the Word.
This teaching is one lesson taken from a full course on ISOW.org. If you are enjoying this video, we invite you to check out the full course in the links below. For the best value, try our All Access Pass At just $99 per month, you can access thousands of hours worth of high-quality, world-class teaching. To check local pricing in your country, visit ISOW.org. For more great teachings like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel and follow us on our social media platforms.
Now, back to this teaching from International School of the Word.
Another reason that you consider soft target, churches are open to the public. We design churches and design ministry to be inviting, right? Isn't that why we've talked about this all the time? We want to look on the webpage and see that you got these ministries and that stuff, so we do everything we can to create the environment and create the mentality that we're open and inviting. And to many people, they look at that, okay, that openness is perceived as weakness. So I'm going to come victimize your church or victimize your people because you guys are, just singing Kumbaya around in the circle, and it'd be easy to victimize you. Openness can perceive weakness. Church services times are publicly known. You go on your webpage, you know what time you're having service, they know what you're doing, they know exactly how you do it. There's many people in this country don't know, what the format is and what's involved. If you see somebody strange come to your church, we think it's a visitor. Somebody new. So, oftentimes they view it that way. Most churches have, and this is the big reason right here, most churches have no safety or security ministry established. Most overwhelming churches, even after all the scenarios that I've showed you already, most churches have zero real plan when it comes to safety and security ministry, and most people know that you don't. And they expect that you don't. They expect that you have no idea what to do if a crisis comes your way. So they pursue it. So let me run some of these possibilities by and see what you think. Consider these unexpected possibilities. Number one, how likely is it that a child in your nursery may be caught up in the middle of a domestic dispute? It's very likely, right? I mean, Steve can get them all in the marriage recovery ministry and stuff, maybe not, But here's the deal. Oftentimes there are people that are involved in your church right now. They have a child in the nursery or in children's church, and they're involved in a domestic dispute. There's a separation there. Maybe the mother is bringing her child because she's trying to get back closer to God because there's things going on in their marriage. And oftentimes that's a hotbed situation for a difficult situation inside your church. If someone is controlled by drugs or alcohol, will see your church as a place to express their anger. Well, let me share a scenario with this guy. I read his testimony. He said he was pastoring a church, and on Sunday morning, some guy came in, walked all the way down to the front. Said, I didn't recognize him, was right in the middle of the service. He stood there and he began to go on a rant towards the pastor. Started using profanity. He was very angry, started yelling at the pastor. And the pastor is in the middle of service, and everybody just kind of freezes, and he says, would a couple of men come up here and help this man, pray for him, take him out of the room? He's trying to defuse the situation, take the guy out of the room, take him away, and nobody moved. So the guy's going on with this rant, he's complaining, and he's yelling at the pastor. So finally the pastor repeats himself and said, would a couple of you guys come up and help this gentleman out? Let's pray for him. Let's, take him out of the room. Nobody moved. So he finally had to pick two men by name and say, Bill and George, would you please come up here and help this guy out and take him out? When they took him out, they found out that he had a pistol in his pocket, a loaded gun. And the reason he was there is because him and his wife were having troubles, and he was drinking that morning. He was highly intoxicated. Him and his wife were having marital problems, and she had come to the pastor for support and prayer, and he saw that as a wedge issue. He saw that this pastor was getting in the middle of his marriage and making it worse, so he came to confront the pastor. There's only one problem. He came to the wrong church. It wasn't even the church that she had gone to. It was another church. So he showed up in the wrong church and confronted the wrong pastor. So if you say, hey, none of this stuff would ever happen to me, what's the possibility somebody could just show up at your church and create havoc or create violence? One I just heard about was in Avon, Arizona. Guy walks in, during service, or I think it was immediately after service, confronts the pastor who wants financial help, wants help, says he needs food. So the pastor says, well, we have food here, we'll give you something to eat. The guy gets angry, and he has a knife on a string around his neck. It's down in his shirt. Oh, sorry. And he pulls it out and threatens the pastor with it. The good thing was that church did have a security system. A couple of the security guys, safety security guys, just intervened, and they kind of ushered the guy out. But it took several guys to kind of get him out of there. He was just going to attack the pastor because he didn't give him money. Now, my interest is not to panic you. My interest is to say that these possibilities could happen at any church anywhere, and that likelihood's there. What if a member of your church had a medical emergency during a worship service? What would you do? We had a guy who actually had a heart attack during the 11 a.m. service, and he died in our church. Imagine that. That's kind of takes the air out of, the whole growth thing, The guy falls over and dies during church. And, we didn't know what to do. We called 911, but most of it, we didn't know if we should lay him down. We didn't know if we should help him. We didn't know if we should try to perform CPR on him. We just simply had no training and really didn't know what to do. And, I don't know if we could have made things better or not, but we were totally, just totally lost. Let me give you this one. This one's even funnier. What would you do if a weather emergency required a congregant to evacuate the church? We were on a Wednesday night service, and it was in the middle of the wintertime, and the lights went off at our church. Anybody ever had something like that, the power go off during your worship service? This is the only time it goes off at church, right? Right in the middle of worship service, the power goes off. Well, we didn't realize we hadn't changed all the exit lights in our church properly, and they were all dead. All the batteries were dead and some, so it's just pitch black in the church. It's just dark, utter darkness. Nobody knew what to do. Children in children's church and youth in the youth ministry, and then nobody knew really what to do. So what they did is they just kind of stayed there. And the good news was that the power came back on in just like a minute or two. But I noticed that during that short period of time, people didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to do to get them out. We didn't know how to really go find people and help them leave the place. And if you have a safety and security ministry, a lot of these things would be alleviated and would help you to deal with them better. Okay. So you say, okay, Chris, after all that, maybe you got my attention. Maybe we ought to do something about this. Let me tell you how to kind of make that jump and to start going in the positive direction as far as the safety and security ministry at your church. Number one, recruit like-minded people. There are already people in your church that God has placed there who have a passion for this, who realize that there's a need, who want to do something, who want to help out. And if you will just, I'm not saying you should get up from the platform on Sunday morning and say, anybody that wants to help us here, help with that ministry, but if you would just kind of circle that you're interested in finding some people will find you who are already in your church, and they'll want to participate in this. So recruit some like-minded people. People will see the need. The second thing I would do is select a leader. And I think that seems, okay, that's pretty elementary or obvious. If you're a pastor, you don't need to run this ministry yourself. In that group of like-minded people, there's a man or a woman there who you can raise up and say, hey, you're in charge of this ministry. Find the right person to do that. Select a leader. And I would tell you, here's where you can find some of those people. The first one is recruit like-minded people. Look for retired or current law enforcement people that might be in your congregation. If you have any deputy sheriffs, police officers, people who are retired from law enforcement, or people who are, maybe were prior law enforcement people, those are excellent people to look for. These people know how to deal with stressful situations. They know how to deal with people. They know how to deal with difficult situations in order to be able to diffuse them and respond appropriately. The other thing, people like firefighters, emergency medical people, those type people are good people for this. You say, well, they don't really know much about security or safety, but they work in an emergency room. Well, those kind of people deal with difficult situations all the time. They deal with people all the time, and they're often good candidates for this. And the other group I would tell you is veterans. If you got some veterans in your church, these people know how to work together as a team. They know how to, they know how to deal with situations. They know how to deal with stressful situations and difficulties. I would look in those groups. There may be people that don't fall into one of those categories who you look at and say, this is the kind of person I want us to help with this. So here's the next thing I would tell you. Start small. Oftentimes I find that when people are trying to develop something like this, they want to go out and I want to do it all right now. I want to get it all together. I want to understand it all, and then I'll implement it. And what oftentimes happens when you do that, you never implement it. You guys are all busy. You all got other things to do. And so it becomes so ponderous that it's impossible to implement. I would say, hey, the old saying that says, hey, a little bit of something's better than a whole lot of nothing. Get started small. Just implement some simple things. One of the things I recommend right off the bat, and this is I encourage you to get the church trainer security jump drive here. It has all this stuff in it that I'm talking about and much, much more.
Thank you so much for supporting our ministry. If this has blessed you, please say a prayer for us. And if you would like to give, we have 3 ways that you can do that. You can give online at isow.org/donate, or text the word GIVE and the amount to 423 423-225-9022. That's 423-225-9022. You can also give through the mail at ISOW, 340 Paul Huff Parkway Northwest, Cleveland, Tennessee, 37312. Thank you. God bless you, and may the Lord multiply your seed. Now back to this teaching from the International School of the Word.
Do a church security assessment. And these things are real simple. All you got to do is go down and you just walk around your property and you realize where the weaknesses are, where the strengths are, what we can do to make this better at our church. And once you do, you know what you do? You start to get a sense about how things are as far as safety and security at your church. Get that team of people and say, hey, you guys just walk around, fill this thing out and see what you find out and see what you need. Do a church security assessment. It'll help you immensely in realizing what the needs are at your church. Identify easy to sell safety projects. Now, I have a friend, and he pastors a church. And at his church, he said right after the thing happened in Sutherland Springs, he said he got up on a Sunday morning, and he said, I just want y'all to feel comfortable. I want y'all to feel safe. He goes, we have a security team here. And he says, I feel like the best response to a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun who shoots straighter. Now, he said, a family immediately got up, walked out the back door. I think you can do this thing in a little bit, low tone, maybe a little much more like fly under the radar approach to this. And here's what I would say. Hey, man, we want to do stuff that better protect our children. We want to do stuff that better protects our facility. We want to do things to help raise people up for this ministry. Well, the mistake we made when we first implemented it, we gave everybody like a tag, like not like a law enforcement badge, but you know what I'm thinking. Thing you clip on your pocket, it's laminated, it said safety and security on it. And like the first week the guy had running it, he had like 14 people there. So, our people walking in the church and there's like 14 people standing around with a safety security tag on their lapel, And people come up and say, Pastor, we have a credible threat here? Is there something going on? Are we in danger? It's like, hey guys, take those off. And how about have less guys standing around talking into their sleeve? Let's kind of roll it back a little bit, Start small, incrementally. Let people get used to the idea of what you're doing, So that helped us a little bit. I had to do some talking to them. Here's what I would tell you. Do some research and development. And this is really where it comes into the jump drive and some other stuff, some other materials. Keep the plan simple and easy to implement. Once again, don't let it get so big. Don't let it get so ponderous. That's what our guys did. They just brought in a bunch of guys. The scheduling thing got so complicated. They had them going every which way. They had guys here, guys there. It just was a little overwhelming, and it almost collapsed under its own weight. Keep it simple and easy to put it involved. Think progress over perfection. General George Patton says this: a good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week. What can you do to get started now? What can you do to get some people who can help you out with this thing? Let me recommend some resources here, and these are all on that jump drive as well. These 3 books here were immensely helpful to me in putting together just what I'm sharing with you right now, particularly the last one over there by Chin. It just lays out the whole thing. He talks about some personal illustrations, things that he was involved in, and really helps to establish that safety and security team. Web pages. I think there are lots of web pages out there that talk about this, but there's 2 in particular that I found the best. And both of these were established by people who work in what I would call just normal sized churches. Neither one of these guys go to a mega church, but they both really had a passion for this, and they're both lay people, and they both developed a ministry for this. And the first one that I would call is Sheepdog's Church Security. They send me an email every week, let me know what's happened someplace else, letting them know things about how things have changed and stuff like that. It's a very good webpage, very easy to follow, some great resources. Both of these that I'm going to recommend you give all kinds of free resources away as well. The other one is Full Armor Church Security Solutions. I have stuff on those web pages that can help you, but I still recommend that you get the stuff here because that's everything on it. There's a couple web pages, and there's those create a dialogue with other people as well. Then I would say, if you're going to do it, you got to train and equip the team. Okay, you got the team, you got some interested people, you got some people that want to be involved in this. Let's go ahead and train the team. And here's one of the things that I would recommend to you if you're going to do this, and it's called the ALICE training. And it's alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. So this is what I would consider the blue chip training if you want to prepare your people for some eventualities. This thing was developed for government, for business, for schools. Most of the schools in my county now, everybody's got to go through this. And and now they've developed a track that's for houses of worship, that are for churches. And it's very good, it's very effective, and to be honest with you, some of the most recent shootings, the places where they've implemented this, it's worked extremely well for them, and where they didn't implement it, you could see the glaring deficiencies. There you go, yeah, pray for me. Anyway, the deficiencies there. My brother is a law enforcement officer in another state. Goes to church that's larger than mine. It's probably about 500 on Sunday morning. His pastor approached him and says, I want you to develop a security team, safety and security team. So they wanted to do this training, and they kind of kept it on the down low. They didn't tell everybody about it. They just said, hey, we're going to do this ALICE training for those people who are involved in a team. Well, you know how things are at church, right? It gets out. People find out about it. People start asking questions about it. So eventually, so many people inquire about it, the pastor says, okay, we'll just offer it to anybody who wants to come. In a church of 500 on an average Sunday morning, they had over 100 people who signed up for the training. And here's what I would tell you. Here's the point I'm driving to towards that. You may say, I don't want to do this because I don't want to panic our people, and I don't want to make our people fearful, and I don't want people to think that there's a danger. I got news for you. They are already concerned. They already wonder what they should do in a situation like that. They've already probably walked into your church and said, what if that happens here? What will I do? How do I react? Over 100 people signed up because they wanted to know what's the right course of action in case something happens like that at their school, at their work, or someplace like that. And I would encourage you that, hey, that there are opportunities there for you to be able to prepare and train the right people, and this is one of the best of them. At Parkland, they found out that most of the people who were there at the Parkland school, even though they had offered this training, either hadn't taken it or had applied it to what they were doing. And because of that, there's studies on this now, that's where most of the carnage or the difficulties happen. ALICE training is one of the best. And the thing about it is most of that training you can get for free from your local law enforcement. I checked with our local sheriff's department. They said they'd be glad to come out and do the training at our church if we wanted it. They were willing to do all kinds of training that would provide safety and security for the people inside of our church, and they would do it all at free of charge. So check with your local law enforcement about that. This is a simplified thing that if you just trained your team to do this would immensely help you. And it's called simply run, hide, and fight. Run, hide, and fight. And you can find this anywhere, but here's the simplicity of this. Oftentimes, if there's a difficult situation or there's some kind of intruder or somebody that's causing trouble at your church, the easiest thing for you to do is just avoid it. And over again, when you study these scenarios, people didn't do that. When the shooting happened at Sutherland Springs, Texas, the guy got out of his car across the street from the church, pulled out an assault rifle, and started to shoot at the church as he walked towards the building. Now, if somebody would have just simply said, hey guys, we're all going out the back door, this guy's coming in the front door, I'm convinced that most of the people that were either injured or killed would not have been. Nobody left. They just stayed there. So the first thing that I would encourage you to do is you want to tell people, and here's the deal with having somebody trained there. You want people there who can say, hey guys, we got to leave. We're all going out the back door. There's somebody coming in the front door. We're leaving right now. If somebody who's trained and knows to do that, it will keep people from just sitting there and wondering what to do. The second one is to hide. Sometimes you can't get away. We're all in this room. It turns into a difficult situation. You can barricade yourself in this room. At Parkland and at Virginia Tech, the people who survived or came through it the best barricaded themselves inside of classrooms, and when they did, the perpetrator would go by and try the door, and if he couldn't get in, he would just go on to the next place, or he would just leave. So sometimes you can't run, but you can hide. You can barricade yourself in, and that might be the best scenario for what you're doing at your church, but you need somebody to tell people that they need to do that. And the last one is to fight. If the people in Sutherland Springs, Texas would have simply just rushed the guy when he came in, when Dylan Roof came in, if they would have confronted him, if they couldn't run and if they couldn't hide, I guarantee you wouldn't have been able to shoot 46 people. But here's the thing, and I want to share this with you. What I would tell you is there's a thing called the normalcy bias. And what that is, there is a self-protection mentality that's it's just part of human nature. And what that says, what the normalcy bias says, is that things will return to normal if I just wait it out. That it keeps you from panicking sometimes in difficult situations. But the downside of it is oftentimes people will just sit there thinking this thing's going to blow over like every other crisis in my life has blown over. And this situation, it's not going to blow over. So the normalcy bias causes people just to stop and maybe to sit down. In many of these situations, they just sat there while perpetrators went from one person to another person. So you need somebody who's trained to overcome that. Just to say, hey, I have people inside my church who have a concealed carry permit or something like that, it's not enough. You need people who can say, hey, we can't stay here. We got to lock the door. We got to confront this guy. We got to do something. Overwhelmingly, people would just sit down and they would wait until this person came by and victimize them time after time. And I will tell you, there are people out there who don't care about what happens to your people. They're there to cause problems. They're there to cause carnage. They're there to hurt somebody. And if you don't have somebody who's prepared, who knows what to do in those situations, oftentimes it will just turn out disastrous. So you need to, where that takes place is in training. If you have somebody there who can tell people what to do, if it's just a couple of people, you will help save a lot of people. The other thing I would say is you need to train and equip your people. You know, how many of you have an active or a working security system at your church? And I find that a lot of churches don't. What about video cameras? You know, Chris Tucker's here with us. And Chris, at his church, he's in Bronson, Florida. His church was, I think, burglarized like 5 times. The guy just kept coming back. And that's what it is. That he's soft target. I'll just keep coming back, kept breaking into the place. So finally, hey, the sheriff's department came out and staked out the place. They put a guy inside. The burglar broke in, and then when he saw the sheriff's deputy, he just ran and went back out the window and got away. So they couldn't stop him. So Chris Tucker fortunately, he had installed a security system with cameras. So when the guy ran back out, they got some video of him, and they were able to apprehend him. If he hadn't done that, this guy can continue to victimize people, maybe his church. So if you don't have an active security system, if you don't have cameras, most of those people, they think that you don't have anything like that. That's why they pick your church. Recently, we had a couple, I've been there 20 years, haven't had a break-in in the entire time I was there. Recently, doing the 11 o'clock service, some guy drives into the parking lot. He drives up to one of the cars that was parked. He sees the lady's purse there, smashes the window and steals it. Fortunately, we had some security cameras out there, and they were able to identify the car. It was a unique car, had a different colored fender on it. The police were able to find the guy and to prosecute him. We've had several situations here recently, and having video cameras and having something there, and this stuff is relatively inexpensive now. You can go on Amazon and buy a host security system for less than $200. Stuff used to be pricey. It's pretty reasonable now, and you can do a lot to protect your church, protect the things that God's made you a steward over, protect the people that are inside of your church. So I encourage you, hey, get some security system stuff. Put the stickers on your windows that say this is under video surveillance. I know it doesn't look very, relevant and cool and popular, but you know what? It'll teach those people who want to victimize you something different. And I would train your people for first aid and CPR. If you got a security safety team, get them some training. If somebody gets hurt, if somebody has, if our people were better trained when that guy had a heart attack, we could have done more to help him. Easy things to do right now. We'll wrap up with this. Got a couple minutes left. Easy things you can do right now. That's what we want to do. We want to go home and use some of this stuff right away, right? Yeah, okay. You guys are going, no. I don't want to think about this. Number 1, secure your facility. One of the things we realize, we leave every door open on everything when we're having church. All the buildings are open, and you could come in through the fellowship hall, walk all the way through our building, and end up in the sanctuary because it was easier. You ever do that? It's convenient, right? If you leave this door open, then you don't have to go all the way around, and you know the back way into your church, and so you leave that door open. Just learn, hey, we're going to lock up some of these things. I'm not saying you got buzz people in to come to church, but I'm saying maybe you don't need every single door and every single window unlocked and unlatched. Just walk around and make sure things are locked up. I have a bad habit of, once I get to church in the morning, I unlock the back door to the office, and that way if I got to go in and out, I just go around that way. Well, the security guys came up and said, hey, somebody keeps leaving this door unlocked back here, so we're going to lock it up every time we see it. Well, I did it, but I like it that way. And they said, hey, you can't leave it like that, Pastor. You need to lock that door. So you need to secure your facility. And here's what I would consider one of the most important things if you're going to do safety and security at your church is situational awareness. Situational awareness. Here's the deal with situational awareness. If you'll just begin to start telling those people, say, hey, here's what I'd like to do. I just want us to be aware of what's going on around us. Back in 1873, a young man was home from college. He was sitting out in front of his dad's general store. And he saw a bunch of guys ride into town that he didn't recognize. He says they went across the street, and when they got off their horses, he said instead of tying the reins off on the hitching post, what they did is just flip the rein around. And everybody's most valuable commodity in that time was their horse. You just never left it unsecure. And he said he struck him as odd that these guys rode up to the bank, and that when they were there that he didn't recognize them, and that they never tied off the reins. And what happened was those guys went into the bank, and he just kind of went around to a bunch of townspeople. These people were untrained, this is not a professional team, and said, there's something wrong with this. And when Jesse James and his gang came out, a gun battle erupted. Those guys never rode as a gang again. Simple townspeople, one person who was observant, stopped the reign of Jesse James and his gang. The biggest part of this is to tell your people to be aware. Why is that person standing in the parking lot? Maybe just walk up to him and say, hey, my name's Chris Chrysopoulos. This is your first Sunday? That person right away knows somebody's seen them. Maybe if you're just aware and you say, this looks out of place. This situation, doesn't seem right to me. And when you begin to tell people to do that, they will develop an instinct and a skill for watching for what is out of place and what is not necessarily right, and be able to deal with it accordingly and be able to be more situationally aware. Here's the other thing. I would just tell you to meet with those like-minded people. To say, let's get together as a group on a Tuesday night and let's talk about how this works out in our church. In doing that, you know what you'll do? You'll create a culture of safety and security with those people. They'll begin to just say, I'm watching, I'm looking, I'm paying attention. You will create a group of people who will be vigilant about what the things that God has made you a steward over. So I would just meet with those people on a regular basis. Let's talk about firearms real quick. Whenever we talk about this, people used to say, well, should we arm these guys? Should we not arm these guys? These people, ladies, gentlemen, both. What do you do about that? First of all, I would say there's probably people that are inside your church that are armed already. Yeah. I don't know how it is here in Tennessee, but in Florida, it's a concealed carry state. And about every other person in my church has a concealed carry permit, I think. Ladies carry them in their purses, guys carry them, and oftentimes they're carrying them at church. But what about your security team? And first of all, I think, that is not that's not a safety and security team. That's just people exercising their rights. So we contacted our insurance company and said, if we put together this safety security team, what if they're armed? And they said, if you're putting together a team, and if you're arming them, or establishing an armed security team, they said they contacted our insurance agent represents 4 or 5 different companies that represent churches. They said when she called each and every one of them, they all had the same response. They said, we want to know if the Gainesville Church of God is going to do that, because if they're going to do that, we want to help them find another insurance company. In essence, they said, we're going to cancel them. They feel like it's a greater risk for you to have a security team that's armed than for somebody actually who would come and do something at your church. They said, we don't want that. So here's the way we approached it. If you're a law enforcement officer, obviously you have a right to carry a firearm. You carry a firearm. That's what you want to do. If you have a concealed carry permit that's been lawfully issued to you in the state of Florida, you have a right to carry wherever you go. And we'll allow you to exercise that right. And if you want to do that while you're at church, you're welcome to do it. And if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. We have people on our security team who don't own a firearm. It's not all about just having a firearm. It's about having people who are vigilant and who care and who want to help people and who want to be there in times of difficulty and hardship. And those people are very valuable to us. So my my caveat to you is that I would encourage you, check with, what's the law there? What's your insurance company say before you start talking about, hey, we're going to encourage people to arm themselves in church. And here's just one of my final thought right now. Remember that this is a ministry. We call ours a safety and security ministry, not so that it will have a palatable church name. We call it a safety and security ministry because we want it to be that. We encourage our guys to get together and pray. We encourage them to be spiritually mature people who are selected for this. And we encourage them to be people who show restraint and who still can show love and who pray to protect the things that God has made us stewards over. And that they want to be servants there. They want to be people who help other people. And they want to help us to be the kind of people that God can do. What does that do? That opens you up to be able to take care of what you are called to take care of. For so many times before we establish something like this at our church, if there's any crisis, any difficulty, any problem, people would come get me. Does anybody relate with that? There's somebody outside. You should come talk to him, Pastor. Something wrong in the restroom. Pastor, can you take care of that? Here, you need to be focused on what God's called you to do. And what this ministry will do is somebody else will naturally, instead of waiting around for you to call somebody out and say, Bill, can you go take care of that? There will be people who are already well aware, who are already trained, who can help deal with difficulties and hardships that happen at your church and free you up to do what you do best. And that's lead people to Jesus Christ, disciple people, grow them, and be involved in the ministries that God has called you to. Amen? Don't forget to get the jump drive. It's got all this stuff on it and so much more. There's a video on there of me giving this talk someplace else. There's assessments on there, all kinds of great things that's going to help you do this. Thank you very much for your time and your consideration.